The first stirrings of worry on grade came not with catastrophe, but with quiet caution. Along this stretch of Tennessee roadway, carved through the Cumberland Plateau, often spoke of the sudden dip in light, the thickening fog in early mornings, and the way loaded trucks seemed to tremble as they braced against the steep descent. It was 1915, and while the region's coal and timber wealth demanded passage, the roads themselves were little more than carved dirt, clinging to the contours of the ridge. Residents warned motorists of the grade's dangers, hand-painted signs marking curves and steep inclines, yet those markers were as fragile as the human resolve that confronted them. Many who traveled this road remember it differently, some with pride, others with fear. Those memories still vary today. Local planners, caught between ambition and caution, debated widening the route or building switchbacks, yet funds were scarce, and the plateau's rugged geography resisted simple solutions. Early reports from drivers tell of wheel slippage, rolling barrels, and the jarring shudder of overloaded trucks negotiating the descent. For truckers carrying coal down the grade, each journey demanded calculation, courage, and constant vigilance. Henry, a driver whose family ran a regional freight line, recalled gripping the wheel for hours, listening to brakes scream and the wheels protest against gravity. He would later say that the signs were helpful, but never enough. They warned, yes, but did not protect. At the time, few realized what this decision would later change. For the grade was more than a road. It was a vital artery linking Chattanooga to Nashville, a conduit for commerce and migration, for ambition and escape. The growing number of automobiles and freight trucks risk, and as traffic increased, the limits of human skill were laid bare against the relentless slope. Yet the danger also inspired ingenuity. Drivers devised new techniques, engineers sketched preliminary plans, and communities pressed for safer passage, understanding that the plateau's natural beauty came with a human price. Those who lingered on the edges, railroad clerks, small-town shopkeepers, and the occasional traveling salesman, remembered the grade as a living entity, its steep curves shaping dialogue and cautionary tales alike. Stories of near misses circulated in local diners, a quiet oral history of respect for a road that refused to be tamed. And though official warnings were posted, the day would come when signs alone could not answer the demands of vehicles, travel, and a nation moving toward modernity. What followed would reshape the road and the people who depended on it. Building a safe passage across grade was a task that tested the limits of early 20th century engineering. The Platte rose abruptly from the valley floor, its slopes carved by centuries of rain and wind, leaving narrow ridges and sudden drops that straight lines or gentle curves. Surveyors marked the land with chains and stakes, sketching routes that balanced gradient, stability, and cost, knowing that every decision would ripple through the lives of drivers and towns below. Records suggest that even small miscalculations could turn a routine descent into disaster, and the crews who on the grade often felt the weight of both gravity and expectation. Men like Samuel T. Galloway, an engineer from Chattanooga, spent months studying soil composition and rainfall patterns. He knew that every cut into the ridge risked landslides, and that each switchback needed precise grading to prevent runaway trucks. Many drawn from local families seeking steady work, swung picks and shovels in temperatures that swung from the humid heat of summer to the frost-lined edges of winter mornings. Horses and early mechanized equipment moved tons of earth, yet progress was slow. They had to build not just a road, but a promise of safety, a fragile one against the stubborn plateau. By 1922, stone retaining walls lined the most treacherous sections, while the sharp curves were softened where possible, creating a path that could bear freight and automobiles. The work was dangerous, accidents were frequent, and fatigue exacted its toll on men who knew the grade did not forgive errors. Yet what they achieved here was rarely celebrated, but it quietly changed how America moved. The improved road reduced travel time, opened Chattanooga to regional commerce, and allowed families and truckers to navigate the ridge with a measure of confidence previously unknown. Even as construction neared completion, the human cost remained clear. Local residents recounted nights lit by lanterns, guiding teams through mud and falling rock, and the constant hum of discussion about where the next guardrail, the next widening, or the next switchback might be necessary. Each choice reflected a delicate balance: speed versus safety, cost versus permanence, ambition versus humility. Would soon find that the grade was no longer merely a dangerous incline, but a carefully engineered passage, one that demanded respect and skill in equal measure. At the time, few realized that these calculated choices, these walls, curves, and grades, would shape not only the flow of goods and people, but the very rhythm of life along the Cumberland Plateau. What followed would test both the ingenuity of drivers and the resilience of the communities that relied upon this precarious artery. For those behind the wheel, grade was never just a stretch of asphalt or stone. It was a proving ground, a daily negotiation with gravity, and a quiet test of endurance. Long-haul truckers, families driving north to Chattanooga, and itinerant salesmen all came to understand its temperament in intimate, sometimes harrowing ways. Joseph "Joe" Riley, a driver hauling coal from the plateau to the river docks, remembered the grade as a place where concentration became a kind of prayer. Each descent required careful brake modulation, constant attention to the load, and an awareness that a single misstep could send hundreds of pounds of cargo barreling into the valley below. Cab interiors told their own story. The smell of engine oil, the vibration of worn brakes, the tense silence punctuated by the occasional whistle of wind against the rig. Accounts speak of windows rolled down to feel the grade slope, of families gripping each other on the sharper curves, and of truckers exchanging terse greetings at the roadside diners, each acknowledging a shared respect for the road's demands. Records suggest that some drivers developed near-ritualistic routines, checking tire pressure thrice before the summit, plotting curves in memory, or rehearsing emergency stops mentally before ever leaving the yard. Local businesses, too, were shaped by those who navigated the grade. Gas stations, diners, and motels rose at predictable intervals, offering respite and repair, a tangible that the human cost of travel required support. Mill operators and coal brokers timed shipments around the grade's most treacherous sections, aware that delays or accidents could ripple through supply chains and small-town economies alike. Families of drivers spoke of anxiety mixed with pride, knowing that navigating the grade demanded both courage and skill. This road was only one part of a much larger system, a network of routes that shaped an entire generation of travel. For many, the grade became a personal benchmark, a story told at dinner tables or union halls, tales of the morning fog, the sudden braking on a curve, the camaraderie of fellow drivers who signaled their presence with lights and horns in silent understanding. It was, in equal measure, a challenge, a livelihood, and a symbol of human resilience. And yet, even with skill and preparation, the grade retained its quiet authority over those who traversed it. Accidents, near misses, and mechanical failures reminded every that the road was neither conquered nor forgiving. What followed would demand even greater attention, not only from those behind the wheel, but from the communities whose lives intertwined with every descent and every mile. The price of grade became painfully clear in the years following its construction. Despite careful engineering and the vigilance of drivers, accidents were frequent, and the grade earned a quiet, uneasy reputation among those who traversed it daily. Period accounts describe trucks losing brakes on the steep descents, cars skidding on wet curves, and sudden fog swallowing vehicles in an instant. Families living along the route remember the eerie sound of engines struggling, horns blasting warnings, and the occasional distant crash that sent neighbors running to help. For many, the grade was not merely a road, but a place where lives and livelihoods balanced precariously on its unforgiving slope. The human cost extended beyond individual accidents. Local towns that had once thrived on passing faced a slow erosion of commerce as drivers learned to approach cautiously, sometimes avoiding stops altogether. Inns and diners, dependent on the steady rhythm of traffic, saw quieter days and dwindling business. In some cases, emergency responders were themselves tested. Volunteer crews navigating the same treacherous curves to reach accidents, aware that one miscalculation could compound tragedy. Records suggest that the cumulative toll of accidents, delayed shipments, and lost lives weighed heavily on the communities, shaping not just economic patterns but collective memory. Truckers and drivers, for their part, carried both pride and apprehension. Henry, now recalling decades later, spoke of friends lost to runaway vehicles and the constant tension of navigating loads down the grade. Yet he also remembered the camaraderie that emerged. Drivers signaling each other through fog, lending tools at the roadside, meals in quiet diners where conversation often turned to survival strategies. It was a human-scale response to a natural and engineered challenge, a reminder that no road, however carefully built, could entirely mitigate risk. The grade's steep inclines and sudden curves also highlighted broader consequences for Tennessee's transportation network. Accidents caused delays for freight, interruptions for, and in some instances, led state engineers to rethink safety measures, signage, and future improvements. At the same time, the stories of peril, narrow escapes, heroic rescues, and the daily grind of skilled drivers became part of a larger narrative, a testament to human resilience against the immutable realities of landscape and physics. At the time, few realized that these cumulative costs would shape public perception, policy, and local economies for decades. The grade had become more than a challenge for drivers. It was a mirror reflecting the tension between progress and peril, ambition and consequence. What followed would test not only the ingenuity of, but the very infrastructure designed to support them. By the mid-20th century, grade was no longer simply a test of skill. It was a symbol of the limits of early highway design. With the rise of trucks, cars, and an expanding national highway system, the grade's steep slopes and sharp curves increasingly conflicted with modern expectations of safety and efficiency. State engineers studied alternatives, widening lanes, reinforcing retaining walls, and adding runaway truck ramps. Meanwhile, the advent of the interstate highway system promised routes that could bypass the most perilous inclines altogether, connecting Chattanooga, Nashville, and points beyond with unprecedented speed. Policy and infrastructure began to shift, guided by both necessity and ambition. Tennessee officials balanced the cost of improving the existing grade against the promise of rerouted highways that would carry commerce safely and swiftly. Records suggest that early debates were contentious. Local residents feared economic isolation if traffic moved elsewhere, while engineers argued that the grade's natural hazards were no longer compatible with national standards. For drivers like Joseph Riley, who had spent decades its curves, the changes were both welcome and bittersweet. A recognition of danger, yes, but also a subtle erasure of a road that had shaped a generation of experience. The turning point arrived gradually. As sections were reinforced and new bypasses charted, grade became a measure against modern design rather than a principal artery. Could descend with greater assurance, and freight moved more reliably, yet the road's identity shifted. It was no longer merely a challenge, a rite of passage, or a lifeline for commerce. It had become a bridge between the old and new eras, a reminder that infrastructure evolves alongside society. Those who had navigated it for decades saw the transition not only in road markings and guardrails, but in the quiet decline of roadside businesses and the change in how locals spoke of the grade in conversation and memory. At the time, few realized that this modernization would also reshape perception. Grade was no longer just a physical obstacle, but a narrative of human ingenuity, risk, and adaptation. Drivers, engineers, and residents alike understood that what they had once considered insurmountable was now a testament to evolving knowledge, skill, and policy. The road remained, but its role in commerce, travel, and local identity had shifted. What followed would determine how the grade was remembered, not only as a route, but as a story of America's broader negotiation between progress and place. Today, grade stands as both a road and a memory, a testament to the people who shaped it and those who were shaped by it. Though bypasses have eased the steepest sections and modern engineering has softened its curves, the grade remains an enduring symbol of challenge, resilience, and human ingenuity. Families, truckers, and who once measured their skill against its slopes now recall it with quiet pride and reflection. Local historians speak of the grade as a connective tissue, linking the small towns along the Cumberland Plateau with commerce, culture, and shared experience, even as the national highway network has evolved around it. Preservation efforts have sought to both the physical and human history of the road. Stone retaining walls, original switchbacks, and early signage have been documented, sometimes restored, serving as reminders of what it took to traverse this incline in the early decades of motorized travel. Oral histories capture the voices of those who drove, repaired, and lived alongside the grade, men and women whose daily routines were dictated by curves, weather, and gravity. Records suggest that these recollections form a kind of living archive, a bridge between generations who experience the grade firsthand and those who encounter it today as awe historians. For truckers and drivers, grade is more than a route. It is a benchmark of skill and caution. Modern freight vehicles descend with stability, yet they carry the legacy of countless journeys that demanded bravery, calculation, and endurance. And for the communities along the route, the grade remains intertwined with identity, a reminder of how geography shaped commerce, how human ambition intersected with natural limits, and how the perseverance of individuals left lasting traces on both landscape and memory. For those who still remember traveling this road, or whose lives were shaped by it, its story never really ended. The grade persists as a quiet witness, a corridor where past and present converge. To stand at its crest or descend its curves is to feel the weight of history, the hum of engines long gone, and the echo of human determination. Grade is more than a passage through Tennessee. It is a reflection of a nation learning, slowly and often painfully, to balance progress with consequence, risk with reward, and memory with forward motion.